Hello, and welcome to this last spooky episode of Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read spooky books and other books too. I'm Lilly.
And I'm Sarah.
And I'm a little sad that we don't have any more spooky books on the docket.
I
know, you're so done with me.
I'm sad for you. I'm not gonna offer to put more spooky books on the docket. We have spooky month next year.
Well, I'm on a roll and will probably be continuing this on my own time. I bought some short stories. I'm pretty excited to dive into them. I was hoping I would be able to in time for this episode for my Read Anything Good Lately. But that's a whole thing that I'll get into later.
We'll talk about that.
Which you've also already heard me talk about enough, poor Sarah. But before we dive into our shed a tear, our last scary episode of the year, what's something good that happened this week? Is it the last episode of Spooky Month?
It's not, but you're right, that should be. It's been raining. It's gray and
wonderful.
Rainy. Well, it's not actually currently raining, but I think it's supposed to start raining again at some point this evening. And I am just so thrilled. We have had like extended periods of rain, and not just like rain, like, you know, it's kind of misting outside. If you stay, your glasses will get wet, but only after
if you run fast enough, you'll gather some condensation.
Yeah, like only after you've been outside for about 5 minutes. No, this is like proper coming down rain. Not, granted, it didn't last very long, but there has been multiple minutes of it. I'm happy.
Rain is best experienced from indoors. It's my opinion.
I don't disagree with you.
Except warm rain. I do love running around in warm rain.
And that's what we're getting, actually, because it's quite humid and warm right now.
It's been pretty nice up here too, but I think my idea of warm has been skewed. That's not my good thing, though.
What is your good thing?
This week has had a lot of ups and downs, but then today I had the most delightful shower thought. You know, just like weird questions that you're like, I wonder. And it's so good. It's my new favorite thing of the week. Do you think that when I give my cats big smooches on their tiny foreheads, they think that I'm just really bad at grooming them?
I don't know.
They clean each other's foreheads all the time. And, you know, like how actual cats do it with, you know, actual grooming and cleaning. And then big, like, hairless mom comes in and gives them a smooch. And they're like, you're not helping at all. What are you doing?
You're doing it wrong, Mom.
Yeah, nice try, but no.
That's a good question.
That thought came into my head today, and I just assume that's truth now.
Mm-hmm. It's gospel.
It is. I mean, they clearly understand that it's affection, but so is grooming, right? Like, I think that they think I'm just getting halfway there.
You're just bad at it. That's all.
I'm bad at it. So what are you drinking on this fine, rainy evening?
Well, I was going to make hot buttered rum, and then I tried it, or I made myself a cup yesterday and decided it was way too sweet to have for the entirety of recording. Mm-hmm. So I decided that I would make myself some nice apple cider. Alcoholic apple cider, I should specify.
I did the same.
Warm.
Yeah, mulled cider.
Yeah, mulled cider.
We didn't make hard cider. That's Ben's job.
Yeah. We don't have that talent. We just have friends with that talent.
Oh, we are trying to make bucket wine.
Yeah.
It hasn't finished yet. That was going to be my good thing when I ever actually get to taste it.
That's exciting.
Spoiler alert.
You've planted a grapevine, yeah?
No, my neighbors have a grapevine that has grown up over our maple tree. So we have a grape tree.
That's super cool.
It is. We got over 50 pounds of grapes off of it.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
I want some of that wine.
You're going to get some. I just hope it's good.
I mean, if it's not good, I'll use it in cooking.
There you go.
or I'll make mulled wine. Like it'll find a use. I'll drink it.
I also made mulled cider for tonight, looping back to the topic at hand.
It's just that kind of night.
I did some wild turkey in mine. How did you spike yours?
I'm using the rum that I bought for my hot buttered rum and a little bit of mezcal.
That sounds lovely.
It's quite good. I did have to go out to the corner store to buy apple juice today, and I discovered that the nice Korean family who used to own the corner store had sold the corner store, which is understand. I mean, they probably wanted to retire, like they've owned it for decades.
How dare they?
but now where will I get my wonderful homemade kimchi?
You're gonna have to learn how to make kimchi.
I guess. It was the best kimchi I've ever had. It was so good. So I'm sad about that. That's like the anti-good thing.
Yeah, I know. I did consider when we were talking about our intro, we could do, a high and a low or a rose and thorn or something. But then I decided we should just do good things, except when we get distracted and talk about bad things.
Well, moving on from bad things.
Yes, we are here to talk about books. Have you read anything good lately?
I mentioned that I was reading Red Bark in our last episode, which is the sequel to the Sherwood Smith book that we read for our interview with her. And oh my God, that book is so good. Red Bark, I mean. Well, Fledglings is good too. Fledglings is good. But Red Bark is like, I have no words. It's so good. You have to read it. Like it's twice as long, 4 times as good. It's so fantastic. I finished it literally half an hour before we started recording, or before we got on the Zoom call to record. Those are 2 kind of different things.
I have so many questions and I can't ask any of them.
You can't. And I'm not gonna say anything, but like we get answers to some of the questions that we had. There is only one bed at one point.
Well, that was a spoiler straight from the author herself.
I mean, Sherwood teased us with that. It's true.
I'm glad it was in this book and not like in book 7 or something.
I mean, it's possible that it happens in every book from now on out.
True, but you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean. But like, it's so good. Like I cannot wait for the next book to come out. I think it comes out in January, and I'm so excited.
That sounds incredible, and I cannot wait. I don't think I'll have time to read it for a little while.
Probably not. Our schedule's pretty packed.
It might be my Christmas present to myself.
If you can take some time off of work to just read it, I mean, you have to.
Oh, funny you should mention that. Because you know what I read lately? Do you know what I took 2 days off of work to read in time for our recording this week?
No. Oh no.
That's not true. I didn't take time off to read The Passage by Justin Cronin, but that is what I did during my time off. And I was so smug. I was like, I'm getting ahead on our podcast reading. I'm not going to be speed reading at the last minute for once. I'm doing so good. My procrastination days are over.
And then
we changed which book we were doing this week.
Which is my fault. Well, so through no fault of my own, I wasn't able to start reading The Passage until Sunday. And we record on a Wednesday. And I started reading it and I got about 250 pages in, and I was like, there's no way that I'm going to be able to read 500 pages of this plus 125 pages of our other book by Wednesday, when I have an obligation Sunday night and I have an obligation on Tuesday night and I have work. It's just not going to happen.
Work. Boo.
I know. So I was like, can we please switch? I don't think I can do this.
I'm teasing you, but I also don't feel guilty that I did end up reading 2 books in less than 24 hours, because I still did end up procrastinating. Turns out nothing has changed.
Well, part of that was that you had to do podcast editing.
I did send you a text that was like, hey, we aren't planning on releasing one this week, right? And you were like, yeah. I was like, oh, fuck.
We're so professional.
Oh, we're really good at this. Hey, got it done.
You did get it done.
If we didn't lift back the veil, no one would ever know. We're just honest.
So that's on us.
Yeah, I've been enjoying the passage so far. I have opinions on whether it is a vampire book or a zombie book, just not what the monsters are, but like which genre it fits into. I think it straddles them both pretty well. I think we are eventually going to have an episode about it just because we have sunk so much time into reading it so far.
I would like to. I mean, I did get 300 pages in. You got 500 pages in. We both bought the book for this. Like, it would be a shame to not do anything with it.
Yeah, I do intend to finish it. It's not my favorite book. And I don't think it's even my favorite book of Spooky Month.
Well, we've read
definitely, yeah, not my favorite book of Spooky Month. That was a bad comparison.
Yeah, I was going to say we've read some really good Spooky Month books. And while the passage is popular, it was turned into a TV show. It's a trilogy. Like, there are 2 other books in the series.
God, no.
I don't think I would say that. It's a little pretentious.
Yeah.
It's just, and slow.
It definitely has some edgelord factor.
Mm-hmm.
It's very slow. I mean,
I think it has value.
Oh, it's not a bad book. And it's just not written for me.
Yeah, it's not a bad book. It's just, well, it being a Spooky Month book means it's probably not to my taste anyway. But
anyway, The Passage by Justin Cronin. But that's not actually what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah, today we're talking about, or the first book that we'll be talking about is A Ritual of Bone by Lee C. Conley. He reached out to us back in July about reviewing a copy. So Lee reached out back in July, and we were not able to fit it in until now, but it fits perfectly with our theme of Spooky Month because it is a horror zombie book.
It is. Oh, I loved it. Speaking of books that are actually written for me.
It was a little scary for me, but I did enjoy it.
You're such a trooper. I cannot thank you enough for indulging in this.
I mean, most of the time I'm the one who sets the calendar, so I figure it's only fair if I give you Spooky Month. Okay, but back to A Ritual of Bone by Lee Conley, which is the first book in a planned trilogy. Book 2, A Ritual of Flesh, is out, and I believe that A Ritual of Blood he's working on currently, and it's not published.
Can I just say thank God? Because I finished this book and had a case of mystery blue balls. There were a lot of different things introduced at the beginning that have slowly been brought together over the course of this book. Different threads sort of picked up and connected, not completely interwoven, but we begin to see the connections and how these different plot lines are creating a full story. And then it stops before it's done. And I was like, no.
It's a great plot to get you to read the book 2 or buy book 2. It really did feel like a setup novel.
This felt like the first half of a longer book, like completely to me.
Yeah.
It was a great first half. I would like to read the second half. But I mean, even with all of those different pieces, I think the pacing and the structure was really good. The way it bounces back and forth between a couple of different people, and then you begin to see sort of how this zombie curse, they're not actually called zombies. Are they ever actually called zombies? But we all know that's what they are.
They're zombies.
They were zombies. You start to see how this monster infestation is spreading and affecting people, and you start to piece the timeline together a little bit, except for one thread, which is actually a pretty big one. Like, I would say possibly one of the main characters I have no idea what it has to do with the book.
And we'll go into that more in the spoiler section. So I won't, I won't further the conversation because we will talk about it a little bit.
And it's extra frustrating because I know it will be brought in just because all of the other pieces have. I just think we haven't gotten there yet. And I really want to know.
Something that I really enjoyed about this book is that it feels like Conley has a very clear idea of where he's going with the series. And it's not that he's just kind of, making things up as he goes along, right? Like he has a vision.
Oh yeah, this book absolutely knows what it is. And you can really tell. We have a couple of other comments on that, but the sturdy foundation that this book is built on, both plot-wise and world-wise, it really shows when you're reading it.
Yeah, agreed. I did have a couple of issues with the prose. Sometimes it was a little clunky and repetitive, especially in the first half of the book. This did get better as the book went on. Mostly I thought that it just needed another editing pass, but it was Conley's debut novel. And again, I'm not a writer, so I'm not going to cast any stones. And overall, I did really enjoy it, but I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that was the strong point of the novel. There are a couple of gems. I've actually pulled out some quotes that I would like to share once we get into more of the horror conversation, because also the zombies are really good. And
we'll talk about that. The zombies are really good. Like, they're fantastic. We're going to talk about it later. I won't gush about how good he is at zombie horror.
I know. Trying to figure out what parts of this conversation counted as spoilers was a whole situation. But I don't think we can actually talk about the zombies yet.
We can talk a little bit about how they made us feel.
And I think we will share some passages because there were a couple of moments that just hit so right with the descriptions of the zombies and some of those truly scary moments.
Do you want to share one of your favorites now?
Sure. I didn't have it pulled up, so we're going to have to take a minute for me to find it.
It sounded like you were, moving in that direction.
One is some classic horror gore, and I don't know if you want me to share that. Are you okay with listening to it one more time?
I mean, I'm fine with it, yeah.
Here, this is some like classic horror that's not gore. A sudden crack of a broken twig startled him. It was much closer this time. His heart leapt into his mouth, and he scanned the swirling tendrils of mist where the sound had come from. Nothing.
Very atmospheric.
Yeah, there's just like some A+ 5-star horror moments. There's definitely some gore in this book.
Oh boy, this book was a gory book. Yeah, it was a gory book.
Well, it is about zombies. I don't think it's a spoiler to say there are some people eating things going on.
Yeah, I don't think that's a spoiler.
Wouldn't that be a twist? Zombies, but they don't eat people. That's just not zombies anymore. Twilight zombies.
Vegetarian zombies.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really enjoyed about the zombie descriptions, again, I'm not much of a zombie person. I'm not the horror or gore person. I'm not a suspense person. But Conley was so good about ratcheting up the tension where you as the reader know like what's going to go wrong, but the characters don't know what's going to go wrong. And that disconnect between watching them barrel head first into the situation and you're like, no.
That is a little bit of a
good
zombie thing.
Yeah.
I mean, so there is some really fun dramatic irony when we as readers or viewers or whatever, we know what this monster is. Not necessarily, right? Because every author does something a little different with it.
But we know the basics.
Yeah. And okay, this is not a spoiler because this is so foundational to zombie stories, but there's always someone who tries to hide a bite. Like, there has to be every time. There's always someone.
You do get that in this book.
Right. And so I don't think they even know yet what bites mean, but we do. And so you're just screaming at the page. No.
Well, and it wasn't even, I mean, I wasn't even talking about the points where the characters are actively trying to hide the bites, but just when you know a character has been bitten,
but they don't know what it means.
Yeah.
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 Yes. Biting. Yes.
Biting.
There was no reply. The figure just kept walking slowly forward, one jerky footstep at a time, with its arms stretched out towards him. That is some 100% genuine, I almost said vampire, zombie action.
It's pretty, I don't want to say stereotypically zombie, because that implies that this book is stereotypical, and it's not.
No, but we can't talk about the ways that it's not yet.
We can't.
I love that, though. It establishes itself as being part of the zombie sort of larger storytelling thing.
Genre.
Yeah. Before it begins adding to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I like zombies, so I really liked having that, you know, like I said, the foundational parts set up and like really truly established before Conley started running away with it and making it his own, which you got to have both, I think.
Well, if you don't have your own unique spin to it, it just starts to feel tired, right?
Yeah.
And this didn't feel, because Conley was putting his own touches to it, like there was nothing tired about it.
No, the zombies were great. But there also are some times where creators get so invested in inventing a new monster. Like, that's just not zombies anymore. It's good.
Right? Like they lose sight of the base monster.
Yeah. Although I also have opinions. I think zombie is a genre, not necessarily a monster, but
that might be beyond the scope of this conversation.
Yeah, I won't bring that up right now. But beyond just the zombies, the entire setting felt extremely well developed. It does take place in sort of that vaguely medieval fantasy world, right? That we all know and love.
Kind of Viking-ish.
Yeah, there's some Viking vibes.
There was talk of like a shield wall, for example, and things like that.
I don't think that's super Viking-y, but
okay. It's been heavily prevalent in all of the Viking-based books that I've read, which is like 2.
Okay,
so
maybe it is. I don't know.
I'm counting it.
I associate shield walls with phalanxes, which is a Greek thing.
But see, you associate with phalanx, not the term shield wall.
That's just a different language for shield wall.
No, but I think that Viking books specifically call it a shield wall.
Okay, sure. I'm sure everyone who uses a shield has made a shield wall at some point. Otherwise, why?
I mean,
why even use a shield?
I'm mostly arguing for the sake of arguing, you know.
But this world is very well developed. And I'm not a big map person. I know I'm not supposed to confess that on a recorded line. There was a map at the beginning of the book. I didn't even zoom in. I'm sorry. It's not my thing. But it's obvious that Conley knows every detail of this world. And I was able to just sort of coast. And he gave enough context clues that I didn't need to be constantly flipping back to the map to figure out what was going on. He held my hand through it, and it was great.
Right. Like you could tell that he had a developed idea of the setting. And so you didn't need to be like, so where is this taking place again? Because you could trust him, and you could trust that he had an idea of where it was in relation to all of the other action.
There were a lot of place names, and I completely just blanked out every time they came up.
I mean, yeah.
I kept track of the characters, and that was enough, right?
That's the important bit.
Yeah, I didn't have to have encyclopedic knowledge of the world in order to follow along with the action.
But it's also nice that you know that knowledge is out there, right?
Right, I trust the author. Like with the plot lines, I trust that the author has a plan because he's clearly shown that he is working towards something. And just because we haven't gotten there yet doesn't mean we never will.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the setting, I think.
Yeah. One little other quibble that I did have is that while I really liked that there were some women who were able to kick ass, I would have liked to see more of them, and I would have liked to see their characters be more well developed. It felt like we focused primarily on the male main characters and less so on any of the female characters.
Yeah, I mean, the main characters were all men. There was this little troupe of lady knights or whatever.
Well, there also is one female character who I believe she got some point of view chapters, and I think that she plays a more prevalent part in the second book.
That's good. I was going to say, well, there are a handful of women characters. Well, I guess 2 with names. Plus some dead ones that we won't talk about. They don't really get much screen time. And so I feel like they were sort of cut short a little bit.
I would have liked to see them be more developed, right? And maybe that'll happen, but
we get a lot of conversation between male characters about how hot those women are, and also they can fight really good. But then we never actually see them fight. We just see them be hot. I mean, that's great. It can be both, but I would like to see both.
Yeah.
I mean, if you like zombies, you should read this book.
Yeah. If you like horror and gore and Vikings, horror Vikings.
There's no boats. I'm sorry. I feel
there
like
are boats.
There's one boat.
There's a boat.
There's one boat.
It counts.
I lied. I did glance at the map. Most of these cities that we're seeing are completely landlocked. That's not Vikings.
I mean, Vikings did stuff on land too.
Yeah, but that's not Vikings. I'm doing jazz hands. You can't tell.
Okay, but this is fantasy Vikings. Who's to say that they didn't have, more land-based stuff in Fantasyland?
Oh, well, I'm sure in Fantasyland they did. You're right. But it's also some fun occult shenanigans associated with the zombies. I really love that we see how I keep trying to say vampires.
Because we were supposed to read a vampire book.
Yeah, I got vampires on the brain. I really love that we see the creation of the zombies, like the beginning of the outbreak. That's one of my favorite things about horror, supernatural, any of that kind of thing. Part of it is always a mystery. What is happening here? Just because it's scary, I love the explanations. That's part of why a lot of haunting or possession stories have no appeal to me, because the answer is always, it's the devil. Whatever. It's just the devil doing devil stuff. That there's nothing there. Whereas in this, we actually, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say that because it's like the first chapter.
We see it quite early on.
I won't say anything about the process, but
we do see how it happens. That's
how the zombies are introduced, as we see their creation. And I loved that. And then we got to watch the other characters discover what is going on and then learn the rules of this particular zombie outbreak with them.
But there's also bits about the outbreak that aren't explained by what we know of how it came about.
Right. So we're also discovering along with the characters.
Yeah. So I'm really interested in seeing how that plays out. Right.
Yeah.
Like I want those answers.
Well, and the rules are always different. We are going to get into a very obnoxiously in-depth, detailed conversation about the concept of zombiehood in the spoiler section, so we don't spoil anything.
By we mean Lilly, because Sarah does not watch or read zombie stories.
But for example, I'm not going to say anything about this book in particular, but sometimes zombies can come out during the day. Sometimes they only come out at night. Sometimes zombies need to be burned to die. Sometimes zombies need to be shot through the head. There's just because we are familiar with the concept doesn't mean we know how these particular zombies function in this world. And so discovering how our expectations have been subverted is always really fun. We got to go there. We got to get to that part. I'm gonna die.
Well, do you want to end with a favorite quote of yours before we move on? Because we've kind of already covered the question of why you should read this book.
Yeah, motherfucking zombies. And cool ones. I rewatched the Romero movies lately, which probably means nothing to you.
Nope.
Yeah. But zombies. We did not bring it up. I'm bringing it up now. In Ritual of Bone, the dog does not die. I was really worried about the dog, and it doesn't matter what I'm talking about. Just know there was a dog who does not die, and I loved it.
I was very glad that the dog did not die.
So I'm going to start with this is our content warning. This is a very gory book. The quote I'm about to read is very gory. Maybe just start skipping now if you're not interested. And our next conversation is going to have a lot of guts and stuff in it. But this quote in particular.
But no eyeballs.
That's true. No eyeballs. Mostly guts.
Mostly guts.
Lots of chomping. Fergus stopped as his eyes fell across the nightmare before him. The girl looked up at him, blood dripping down her chin and staining her white shift with fresh blood. She pulled her hand from the dead sentry's throat. She held a globule of flesh in her hands and took a bite. She looked up at Fergus and chewed slowly. He saw her eyes roll back in her head. Blood squirted across her face and down her chin as she bit into it again. She snarled and ran towards him, with her eyes blazing. He stood frozen in disbelief, watching her speed towards him. She was mere paces away when one of the warriors sprang forward and buffeted her with his shields.
Pleasant.
Lots of chomping. That was just my comment to that was, that's some classic horror gore right there.
Yeah, it's pretty horror and pretty gory.
If you like that, you should read this book. To avoid spoilers for A Ritual of Bone, skip to 45:47. But Sarah, why is Bjorn?
That's a good question, Lily. Why is Bjorn?
I should use his proper name, Friend Bjorn. Because that is how everyone refers to him, Friend Bjorn. He was a cool character. I liked his sections. That was just the one arc that did not get connected back to zombies yet, and I am waiting with, on the edge of my seat to find out.
I don't know if I would say that it's the only arc, because the plague doesn't necessarily get connected back to zombies yet.
The plague? Are you talking about the city?
Yeah.
No, that was a zombie outbreak.
No, because it's not zombies. It's just a plague.
No, they were coming back to life.
They weren't coming back to life, though.
Yeah, they were.
No, they weren't.
All right. I dropped my phone.
They were dying in horrifying ways, and they were coughing up blood and being very bloody. But they weren't coming back to life.
Well, the people on the boat got tossed overboard. So we don't know if they came back to life.
The people in the city hadn't come back to life, at least as far as we saw.
That's what was happening during that last prayer thing.
But those weren't people who were dying of the plague. I thought that was different. I thought that those were people who were killed, and so they were subjected to the zombie mojo, whatever was going on.
We're going to talk about that in a second.
But I thought that was separate from the plague itself.
That was not my impression. But maybe. I don't know. Who knows?
We just got to read book 2.
Well, I definitely want to.
I would read book 2 for the podcast. It's a little too horror for me to read by myself, probably.
I understand.
You could convince me to read it for the podcast, though. I enjoyed it enough to do that.
It is also definitely magical in origin.
Yeah.
There's no scientific explanation, right?
Well, this is a fantasy novel. I mean, it's for all that it's a zombie novel, it is also a fantasy novel.
And I'm down for the fantasy zombies. It's, scholars meddling in necromancy and they bring someone back to life and
And I'm really interested to see how that plays out because they're part of like a college, right? And we don't know whether the people who brought them back were kind of acting on their own or if they had the college's blessing to conduct these experiments because they were conducting experiments. And I think that that's a really interesting thread that can be picked up and hopefully will be picked up in the next books.
The impression I got is that they misled the college with what they would be doing.
I think so, but we have one of the characters going back to the college to talk about the work who is under the assumption that like they're going to be respected as grand scholars and grand discoverers.
Well, but that's because he's the apprentice of the scholar who's all about this, right?
But he also he wouldn't have this idea if it weren't rooted in some kind of basis in reality. Now, how realistic it is, I don't know, but I feel like it has at least a chance of being true.
I'm not sure because there were 2 scholars doing these experiments, except there were 2 scholars researching these ruins, and one of them was using the ruins for necromancy, and the other one was like, whoa.
But
hold on.
So the other one got to a certain point, and he was like, hold on. But he didn't object to conducting the rites initially, which makes me think that there's a certain level of necromancy that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be one thing if you went and you were like, hey, I tried it, turns out it doesn't work. Like, we can prove that it's wrong. How else do you prove that it's fake, right? But then the second they started getting results, he was like, we got to stop.
I think, so I kind of disagree. I think that he wanted to get safe results. Like, if they had been zombies and they could be controlled, I think he would have been okay with it.
Well, sure. And I also think if they had come back with, hey, we have this cool pet, let's take over the world, the college would probably be more okay with that than, oops.
Yeah, I'm just saying that I'm interested to see how all of that plays out.
Well, we do see another scholar unrelated to those experiments near the very end of the book, and he completely dismisses it entirely. And we aren't sure at the beginning of that conversation if he's genuinely appalled at the concept or if he's just hiding something. But then we get his point of view later, and he does seem to like have truly no idea about it. So I don't think it's a huge college conspiracy.
No, I don't think it's a college conspiracy. I think that these scholars who essentially brought about the zombie apocalypse did so like on their own, right? But that doesn't mean that the college wouldn't have welcomed their results had the results been more controllable.
Oh, and that feels like a false question. Like, of course the college is going to take credit for it if it's a success. That's just how colleges work.
Well, but I'm interested in seeing how they deal with it now that it's, not a success, or a success, but in very different terms.
Right.
Because we have the apprentice who's going back to the college, but no one else survives.
I assume that the apprentice gets on the boat and he is what causes the outbreak.
No, I don't think that's what happens.
All right. Because the timelines are a little fuzzy.
I read a review of book 2 that implies that the apprentice goes back to the college.
Oh, okay.
And is not the one who causes the outbreak on the boat.
Well, that's cheating. That's extra information.
But to be fair, I didn't think that he was the one on the boat after reading the book anyway, so.
Yeah. Okay, one thing that this book does differently from classic zombies or even pop culture zombies, is that there's two different flavors. I loved that.
I love that. It also took a while to show up. And so when we first saw it, I wasn't sure if what we were seeing were really two different varieties or just like an evolved version.
I was also very confused, but I feel like that was because we were discovering it at the same time as the characters.
I mean, I agree. Like, I don't think that you're wrong there.
Mm-hmm.
But I did have that initial moment of confusion. I think it works well. And I loved that there were two different versions. Also, the version that is like cursed is kind of very horrifying because these are the people who are bitten and who are slowly evolving into these undead creatures. And you have a couple of times where you see their inner struggle, and you can tell that they are aware that they're losing their personality, but they don't really know what they've lost. Like they know that they've lost something, right? But they don't know exactly what. And that's just horrifying.
I'm going to turn you into a horror lover yet. Yes, the struggle of identity. Exactly. I'm going to quibble with you a little bit. They aren't turning into undead creatures. They're turning into these cannibal monsters.
Okay, whatever. I won't argue there.
Only because when they die is when they become the brain dead shuffling zombies.
We haven't seen these characters die and turn into zombies, though.
We've seen the cursed die.
But they didn't come back, did they?
Mm-hmm.
Did they?
There were a couple of times when someone gets infected and freaks out and starts eating people, so they kill them.
Yeah, okay.
But they don't kill them,
I guess
right?
I guess you're right about that. Okay.
Yeah. So I assumed that was like stage 2.
People who die and then come back as the stage 2 zombies, they just skip stage 1 completely.
Oh, well, so I think it's death is the thing. If you get bitten but don't die, you turn into this monster.
Right. Yeah.
But if you die, whether
you just go to the zombie stage.
Yeah, it's the undead. That's why I quibbled over the word undead, because I feel like that's the defining.
Okay. Yeah. So
factor.
the people who are bitten, they're not technically undead. They haven't died.
Right.
You're right.
Not necessarily. They might die from the bites, right? They might get half eaten or whatever.
But they haven't died yet. Yeah.
Yes. The bites might not kill you, but it will turn you.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't get along. I loved that. I have so many questions. We'll say the cursed and the undead as their sort of differentiators, but they fight whenever they interact, which also confuses the humans quite a bit.
There were just all of these really neat like world building details that I really enjoyed.
I guess I don't have to say spoiler alert because
we're in the spoiler
section. The ritual of bone is what makes the zombies. That's why I didn't feel like it was a spoiler. It's the title of the book.
I do like that connection to the title.
Yeah, that's what it's about. It tells you right there.
And I'm really interested to see how a ritual of flesh, which is, as I said, I believe the second book, and a ritual of blood, like, are there new rituals? Does that play a part in books 2 and 3? I guess we have to read to find out.
I'm guessing we're going to get that. I cut the part where I went on a zombie rant, or I will cut it. I know that already. But there is the classic military versus science tension in zombie stories. And I feel like it's going to go there because there are going to be people in the college who want to study the zombies so that they can reverse it or undo it or stop them somehow. Whereas the military is like, no, we should just kill all of them, which would be fine if it was possible. But usually they don't actually manage to kill all of them, which is why the scientists want to study them, because how else are they going to get rid of them? And I think there is going to be a faction of the college that wants to do that. And I think that some of these other rituals will be their attempts at reversing it.
Interesting.
That's my theory for the rest of the series. But I don't even have to wait that long. I can find out right now.
You can find out
I'm
Book
not going
two
to
is-
stop the recording to read book 2, but
Yeah, I was going to say book 2 is out. Book 3 is a work in progress, I believe. So it hopefully will be out soon and you won't have much long to wait. I look forward to seeing whether or not you're right. And maybe we'll see. We'll see if I read book 2. I did enjoy it. It was just this was very horror and gore for me. This was a little outside my wheelhouse.
it's not your jam. I get that. But
It's
the
not,
fact that you can still enjoy it despite that says something about the book, doesn't it?
yeah, it's not that I didn't like it. It's just that I had to take a couple of breaks in between reading it.
I think that's been my summary for every book so far for Spooky Month has been, I know it's not your thing, but you can acknowledge that there's good parts. So that just means the book is that good.
You're not wrong.
Despite Spooky Month being my idea, you did contribute some of these book suggestions.
I contributed half of the book suggestions.
It was a collaboration.
So it was, I mean, I feel like I did my share.
It also means you have no one to blame but yourself. And also me.
I mean, I mostly blame you. But so our second book for this episode was Carnacki, the Ghost Finder by William Hope Hodgson. And this book was written in 1910 or published in 1910. I guess that doesn't mean it was written then. And I think that I found it because Premi Mohammed talked about it. Premi, or possibly Premi, she was on the SFF Addicts podcast recently. And I think that Adrian called her Premi, so maybe I've been mispronouncing her name this entire time, in which case I'm
no.
very, very sorry. Yeah, I don't have anything to say for myself there. But she tweeted about it and it sounded interesting. So I was like, we should read this for Spooky Month. And we did.
Can I just say, when you pitched this book, I wasn't sure if it was fiction or nonfiction. No, I don't think ghosts are real. But when you say, oh, it's about a ghost hunter in the early 1900s, I was like, oh, I'm sure they had ghost hunters back then. It would be really interesting to read like the journals from someone like looking for ghosts in such a different time era.
No, that's not what this is.
That's not what this is at all. Which is fine. It's just funny that I was like, this could be anything.
I didn't realize that was how you had taken my pitch.
It was. That's not what this is. It's more like if Sherlock Holmes was a supernatural investigator.
Yes, this is very inspired by Sherlock Holmes, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost Sherlock Holmes fan fiction.
Except that sometimes it actually is a supernatural entity.
Right. But I mean, I like that. And actually, I'm skipping way ahead, but I love that some of these mysteries are supernatural and some of them are human. Because then when you're reading it, trying to guess, because of course you're trying to guess what the deal is while you're reading it, it could really go either way, which is such a cool reading experience.
I loved that about the series. And so before we actually start talking about the book,
sorry, I got excited.
in general, I should say Carnacki the Ghost Finder is a series of, I don't know if they're really considered short stories.
Yeah.
Short episodes, short stories.
They're short stories.
Yeah.
The shorter thing than that is flash fiction, and this is definitely not flash fiction.
It's not flash fiction. I just wasn't sure if it was considered short stories because I'm not sure if it was published, if each short story was published independently.
I don't think it has to be. It feels like a serial, though.
It does feel like a serial because these are independent stories that are just collected together, right? Like they happen to be, the framework is that Carnacki invites his guests over to hear about his latest job doing, figuring out a supernatural, like what is haunting some kind of place.
He's an investigator. He's there to find out if it's supernatural or not. And I really like his approach. We're going to talk about that in a second. I realized I have not given my disclaimer. Like how I said at the beginning that I read 2 books in 24 hours. No, I didn't. I read 1.5 books in 24 hours. I did not finish this, but it's a collection of short stories. So I can talk about, most
The books you read, or
Yeah.
the stories you read.
But I guess I had made the assumption that they are completely independent. It's possible that at the end, the last couple of ones draw it all together in some grand conspiracy.
They don't.
Yeah, okay.
I can tell you,
that's not true.
I read all of them. They don't. They stay fairly independent.
Yeah, so
I think what they do have in common is they all reference earlier stories, which I don't think are written, but they reference earlier adventures that Carnacki had.
But that's a Sherlock Holmes thing too. Watson is constantly referring to other adventures they've been on, not all of which are actual written stories.
Well, this was basically superstitious Sherlock Holmes.
It is. I love it.
It was fun. I was glad to have read it.
Yeah, I guess love it is a little strong. There's a lot of animal death, which is very hard.
That was rough. I think there's a cat that dies in the very first story, and the animal death doesn't get better from there.
And it's not even oh no, it was a horrible accident. He brought the cat to basically be a canary in the coal mine. He intended for it to get killed by a ghost, and that's horrifying. And I know that this is spooky month, but not like that.
It's horrible. I do think that that's kind of just emblematic of the times. They didn't care as much about that sort of thing in 1910 as we do now.
I don't think there were animal abuse laws. I don't think there were child abuse laws.
Well, also readers just didn't like it. Readers expect, not that they expected it, but it wasn't horrifying.
It was much more socially normal.
Yeah.
To animals were more like objects. They were not parts of the family, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure everyone was different, but I think the overall emotions towards them was not nearly as
personal.
I give my kittens smooches on their forehead and they think I'm grooming them bad. I did have to stop after the first story and give my cat some big hugs because,
yeah. The animal death was a little rough.
And it's also not off screen at all.
It's not. It's pretty blatant.
That was, we did not bring it up. I'm bringing it up now. In Ritual of Bone, the dog does not die. I was really worried about the dog, and it doesn't matter what I'm talking about. Just know there was a dog who does not die, and I loved it.
I was very glad that the dog did not die. I almost feel like you should cut this in completely without context, without any kind of transition.
Non-spoiler section, right?
Yeah.
All right. Anyway. Well, the other truly chilling thing about this series is that it's in double first person.
So you must have loved it.
It's not even one first person. There's 2 first person narrators.
Your favorite.
I mean, all jokes aside, you don't even really notice. The first narrator is the friend being invited to the dinner to hear Carnacki tell the stories, and then the second narrator is Carnacki actually telling the story. So the first narrator is not in it at all. It doesn't even have
Hodgson.
It's Hodgson. Okay, maybe he does have a name eventually.
he does have a name, but his name has no importance. It has no bearing on the story whatsoever.
He literally exists just so that Carnacki has someone to tell the story to.
Yeah, he is the framing story.
Yes. It's as if Watson just sat there hearing about all of Sherlock Holmes' stories from Sherlock instead of being the one writing it down. But then, all of these stories are told from Carnacki's perspective. But that doesn't bother me because the whole point is, he's telling a story. there's a reason for it. And I mean, yeah, there are some things where it's like maybe someone wouldn't narrate it this way, but I actually think his character is pretty like well established.
I think he's pretty consistent throughout the series.
Yeah.
I also like the idea that he is narrating it because it means that we know at the end of the story he's going to come out okay. And there are times in the stories that he's telling where if you didn't have that kind of framing, you would be like, well, is he going to survive? Some of these situations that he's in are quite scary.
Yeah, I mean, he's, toe to toe with horrific specters who, like, rules don't apply to them and they want him very dead. But we know he makes it.
Which is a relief for me.
It does. It definitely changes the tone of reading it, right? There's a lot less stress. There's a lot less tension, which can be good or bad depending on what you're looking for. But it makes these a lot more like fun detective stories instead of stressful horror stories.
I still had stress and horror, even if I knew that he lived.
Other people die.
Other people do die. Although I think that that's mostly alluded to and not actually shown. He does talk about a haunting that he went to where someone didn't step within, his electric pentacle or whatever.
They didn't believe in the like supernatural like salt circles. And so they were like, that's dumb. That's superstition. And then they get killed by the ghost.
But we don't actually see that story. So we just hear that secondhand.
I'm referring to the horse. First of all, horse haunting? What? What? But also that one character dies in it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I'm not going to call that a spoiler. It's fine. But not him. And he's really the only main or recurring character, so...
It is a really interesting mix of modern and superstitious, though.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. I love it. I love his methods.
Because he goes from being completely modern and scientific based. He uses the scientific method.
Yes. He goes into every situation trying to prove that there are no ghosts.
Yeah.
And the second that fails, he's like, all right, let's get the holy water.
even when he knows that it fails, he still uses these superstitious methods in kind of a scientific manner, if that makes sense. He's very methodical about what he does and how he does it. And it was a really interesting dichotomy to read about, to see how he marries these two very disparate elements.
It felt very, pardon the phrase, realistic. I mean, that is the true spirit of scientific discovery, right?
The true spirit?
But you're supposed to go into every situation with no assumptions. And like he honestly does that, right? Like he's not assuming whether or not there's a ghost here. He's trying to disprove that there is a ghost. But then he also, has tested different protection methods like the pentacle circle.
It's if he can't disprove that it's a ghost, then he's willing to believe it's a ghost, which is more than a lot of characters in this kind of story are willing to do.
But he's also seen proof of ghosts.
Yes, the supernatural is a thing. He knows it's a thing. He knows it's not always a thing. Like it's not always the case that there is a supernatural reason for whatever event is occurring. But like as not, it is.
Or in the ones we see anyway. I'm sure he goes on missions that we don't see. Well, but those aren't fun to talk about. I'm splitting hairs. I love that you don't know as the reader if the answer is supernatural or mundane. That is the mystery is the best part of any like horror situation. And these really are mystery stories. What is causing this phenomenon? And it could literally be anything, which is such a fun space to play in.
And when it is supernatural, it's horrifying.
Oh, yeah.
And super scary.
And there are some where he doesn't actually really come up with
Great
an
answer.
answer. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a couple where there's a human culprit, but there's a supernatural element too, and he finds the human culprit, but the supernatural bit is still kind of unsolved, and he's like, "Yep, there was this thing, and I don't have an answer for that."
And usually that kind of thing would bother me, but I feel like the Carnacki as a detective has like genuinely investigated all of the sides. It doesn't feel like a cop out when that is the answer.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned how he mixes the superstitious with the modern. And I think the best example of that is the electrical pentacle.
Mm.
Sorry, it's not a pentagram, it's a pentacle. You're very specific.
I think I might have called it a pentagram earlier.
Because that's the word that we know. He differentiates between them at some point, and I don't care. It's not real. Whatever. Great.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. I like that he cares though. But he references some paper that is completely made up, of course, about how electrical currents stopped a medium from being able to see into the other world.
Mm-hmm.
So he creates a pentacle, which is usually he would do a pentacle out of salt or chalk or garlic or holy water. Yeah. Another substance you can make a pentacle out of is electricity. And he uses what I assume are like tubes of neon, although I'm sure that's the wrong era. But the way he describes it as a vacuum.
That's how I understood it.
It's a vacuum with electricity in it that creates a very that glows but doesn't actually illuminate a room very well. That's neon. And he creates pentacles out of this, and the electricity is the barrier, and that is very fun and very cool, and I am here for it.
I think this would make a really interesting TV show if it was modernized.
I think if you crossed Dirk Gently with Carnacki, you would have the best thing in the world.
Yes. I would watch Samuel Barnett as Carnacki.
Yeah, that's really what I meant. But then also you need Elijah Wood. I wanted to call him Frodo, but I was like, that's not his actual name.
Samuel Barnett as Carnacki, Elijah Wood as Dodgson.
Oh my god.
I would watch the shit out of that.
Dodgson isn't it? Dodgson would have to be more of a Watson, I think. Like,
Carnacki
would need a friend. He would need a buddy. That would make the whole thing better anyway.
I mean, I think that if you were to adapt this for TV, you would need that anyway. So you just make Dodgson that character.
Mm-hmm. It's right there.
You cast Elijah Wood as Dodgson, and you have Samuel Barnett as Carnacki.
Right to the BBC. We have $1 million idea. They owe us money.
Holy shit, I would watch that. Man, it'd be so good. I should rewatch Dirk Gently. That was a good show.
Yeah, I'm just distracted now. We were talking about Carnacki, the ghost finder.
No, but now I want to watch Dirk Gently and talk about Dirk Gently.
Okay, I have a question that's actually on topic. Where does Carnacki get all of the hair?
It's a good question.
One of the main substances he uses to seal off a room or make protection barriers is human hair. And when it's just like a windowsill or something, that's fine. I can hand wave that away. But in one of the stories, he makes a 30-foot circle out of several substances, one of which being like one layer of the circle being human hair. That's a lot of hair. Where is he getting all of this hair? I need to know. I want that story of Carnacki sourcing all of his weird shit.
Maybe he has a sister who has very long hair.
That would be really long hair.
And he goes to her period. Well, he only needs one strand, for each thing. So maybe he goes to her and says, hey, I need, 10 strands of hair.
All of the stuff like that I was okay with. It was just the 30-foot circle that really stressed me out.
Well, because you can, kind of hand wave away everything else.
Yeah.
But 30 feet is a lot of hair.
And it was unclear if that was diameter or circumference. 8 to 10 grown men sit in it with their legs outstretched, so it's got to be pretty big.
It is a lot.
He just like had that much hair in his pocket. That's fine, I guess.
I want a Carnacki supernatural crossover episode where they talk about where they get all of their supplies.
Right? Like, I think that's interesting. And obviously this doesn't go into it at all. But I think that's a really fun aspect of the job, of the gig.
He does say at one point that he plugs his ears loosely with garlic, and that's just gross.
that was the whistling one, right?
I think that's the whistling one.
There's an evil whistle.
And that was a creepy episode.
Oh, the description of the end that we're not going to talk about, because I'm not even going to bother with spoiler section for this conversation.
Yeah.
Some of the hauntings, actually not even all of the hauntings, some of the descriptions, just the descriptions of these events that may or may not be supernatural, are so disturbing.
And vivid.
Yeah, they're vivid and uncomfortable and not like explicit or gross necessarily, but just so fundamentally wrong.
You get shivers.
Your brain is like, unacceptable.
Yeah. The image left after this particular story was unpleasant. I'm just going to say it was unpleasant.
And I mean, even the first one, I think you pulled out not necessarily the imagery, but the first story in this collection had a very unsettling bent.
So there's a line in that story about how he's wondering whether or not his impulses to, he's in this protective circle, and he's finding that he's doing these things, he's taking these actions that kind of inadvertently weaken that circle. And he starts to wonder, well, is this actually me doing this without influence, or am I being influenced to do this and just not realizing?
And it's really insidious stuff, right? Like, he gets a leg cramp, so he tries to straighten his leg out.
Yeah,
but then he kicks over the holy water, and or he's shuffling around to try to keep the creature in his sights, the spirit in his sights, and all of his shuffling like wears the chalk line away, and that uncertainty, that lack of free will.
Am I causing this? Yeah,
Sarah, that is horror.
Yeah, no, it's a great example of how you can do horror.
Like, why should you read this book? I think if you like Sherlock Holmes and if you like supernatural / horror stories, you would definitely like this book. I think if you have patience for outdated, I don't want to say storytelling. The storytelling feels very good and modern, or not good and modern, but familiar and modern. But there are definitely some cultural aspects that are a little rough.
It was published in 1910, and you notice that.
Like, yourself better than we do. If you know that you can enjoy something through that, then this book is definitely for you. There's a lot of animal death.
Yeah, if you have to look up, does the dog die for every movie, this is not the series for you. No shame in that.
No, I probably won't reread it because of that.
Yeah. But yeah, if you like Sherlock Holmes and wish that Sherlock Holmes had more supernatural to it, you would probably enjoy this. It's
also some really nice short reading, right? It's A, not a huge novel, and B, each story is contained. So if you just want
it's like each story is like 5 pages.
Yeah, it's just a little ghost story. Each one is a little ghost story, and that's really nice. Sometimes that's what you want. Just a small spook with the side of cat mutilation. I'm still mad about it.
I mean, as you should be. Okay. For this episode, we have a Words Are Weird. Dan Fitzgerald, this is dedicated to you because you were unhappy when our last episode did not have a Words Are Weird. We did have a pet peeve. That wasn't sufficient. I'm sorry.
How could we not have a Words Are Weird segment in our episode about Carnacki the Ghost Finder? Because it has plenty of material.
Yes. There are a lot of weird words in here. And also words that are not weird, but just differently used from the way that we use them today.
Absolutely. A large part of it is that this book was written over 100 years ago, and they used queer to mean strange. But it still makes me stop and blink every time I get to that word. And that word comes up a lot. He feels queer a lot, and not in the fun way.
That didn't bother me. I don't know if I'm just used to reading old things more.
It didn't bother me. I had to stop every time.
But you noticed it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm saying that I didn't notice it when I read it.
I think if he didn't use it as much, it wouldn't have jumped out at me. But he uses queer like twice a page.
Yeah, and I'm saying that it just didn't stand out to me at all.
Oh, I think even without the different definition of the word as used today, the sheer volume of the word would have jumped out at me.
Possibly.
But he also uses, well, abnormal. That's a word that we all know. But Hodgson uses abhuman.
I get where he's coming from with that, because he's contrasting it with human and normal and abnormal. But that's not, we don't use abhuman, we use supernatural.
Right. Or inhuman. It's not quite the same thing as abhuman.
It's not quite the same thing.
Right, I get it. That word prefix meaning is different, but that's just not a thing. It's just not a thing.
It's not the way that we use language. But despite that, you get where he's like what he's trying to say.
Oh, it's perfectly clear. Yeah. He also uses funk a lot. Oh, you pulled out a great quote.
There was a quote that I really enjoyed. For me, for my version of the book, which is not your version. I don't know if the pagination is the same.
It's like one sentence. I'll be okay.
But he's in the situation and it's not great. He's not feeling great. He says, I felt like a kind of human periwinkle encased in boilerplate and frozen with cold and funk.
Funk. It's a good word. It's really satisfying to say.
It's funny because that's not why I pulled out that quote. I pulled it out for human periwinkle encased in boilerplate.
I know, but we brought up funk, and so I thought you should have the opportunity to just slip that in.
I appreciate it. It's a great quote, and it is a fun word to say.
You know what words I'm going to have fun attempting to pronounce? All of the weird occult words that Carnacki is not the author, that Hodgson invented for Carnacki to use.
And are there some occult words.
They are 99% vowels.
I would love to hear them pronounced by someone other than me.
Are you ready?
Go for it.
There are two different types of ghosts in this world, one of which is Aeiirii. And the other one is Saiitii. The Saiitii are more dangerous than the Aeiirii. These are made up words. I'm not being shitty. I would like to just say that real quick. Why did he make up words with so many vowels? Are you ready for the next one? The next one is even better.
They sounded funnier?
Maybe. I feel like the tone of this wasn't supposed to be funny, though.
No,
maybe it was.
But I mean, I think that Hodgson.
It's actually nonfiction, and Hodgson is Carnacki, and this is just his diary.
I like that view of it. I feel like Hodgson was kind of writing satire, though, in a way. He was satirizing Sherlock Holmes, and the more absurd he could get the supernatural to be, the better.
Well, it worked, including the Saaamaaa ritual. Now, listener, you might think I'm exaggerating, but there are 6 A's in that word.
There are quite a lot of A's.
The last one, of course, is the incantation of Raaaee. Now, there's only 3 A's in that one, but that's still a lot.
That is still a lot.
I feel like we have to include pictures of these somewhere, because while my interpretations are perfectly accurate, I still think seeing them adds something. Maybe we can throw them in the show notes.
Yeah, I was going to say we can include the spelling in the show notes. And you can see that Lilly is not exaggerating any of the vowels when she pronounces them.
I'm really not. I did have to stop and say them out loud every time I got to one in the book because they were so over the top. Raaaee.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Twitter and Instagram at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated.
Bye.